In this video, we are going to look at what you could get for a single dollar bill in 1954 in the United States. But this is not just any year I picked off a calendar. I chose 1954 for a very deliberate reason. America was hurting. A recession had quietly settled over the country like a cold fog. Factories were cutting shifts. Workers were being laid off. The Eisenhower administration was watching unemployment tick upward and trying to hold the line on a budget. And yet, even in the middle of all that economic pain, a dollar was still real money. Honest money. Kind of money that could actually do something when you put it on a counter. That is the part that should stop you cold when you compare it to today. Because right now, in an era when America is supposedly prosperous, that same dollar bill is essentially a coupon for nothing. So before we get into it, if you are new here and you love American history told straight, no textbook fluff, just the real story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. There are plenty more of these coming, and you do not want to miss a single one. Now let us go back. Back to 1954, when a dollar was still worth fighting for. First, let us set the scene properly, because context is everything. The 1954 recession was America's third recession since the end of World War II. The post-war boom that carried the late 1940s had softened. The Korean War had ended in 1953, and with it went a massive wave of government defense spending. That spending had kept factories humming and workers employed. When it dried up, the economy felt it immediately. GDP contracted. Unemployment climbed from roughly 2.5% in 1953 to nearly 6% by the middle of 1954. That does not sound catastrophic by modern standards, but to a country that had just survived the Great Depression. Barely 2 decades earlier, any rise in unemployment sent a quiet panic through kitchen tables across America. People were careful with money in 1954. They had to be. Every nickel was turned over before it was spent. Every grocery purchase was weighed against what the family actually needed versus what they wanted. And that is exactly why what a dollar could buy in that year is so remarkable. Because even in a recession, even when people were watching every cent, a dollar stretched far enough to mean something real. Let us look at exactly what it could do. You could get 5 loaves of bread for $1. A standard loaf of white bread in 1954 cost about 17 cents. Wonder Bread, with those famous red, yellow, and blue balloons on the wrapper, was the bread of American households. Soft, white, impossibly uniform. Your mother kept it on the counter in its wax paper sleeve and bought it twice a week because it went stale in 3 days. The bakery delivery truck still counts some streets in 1954. The driver knew every family on his route by name. He knew you took 2 loaves and left a note if you needed an extra today. That same name-brand loaf runs around $4.50. That is an increase of over 2,500%. And here is the part that ought to make you stop and sit with it for a moment. If the federal minimum wage had kept pace with the price of bread over those same decades, workers today would be earning well over $40 an hour. Instead, the federal minimum wage sits at $7.25, right where it has been stuck since 2009. The bread kept rising, the wages did not. Something broke along the way, and it has never been fixed. For your dollar in 1954, you could also get 3.5 quarts of milk. Milk ran about 28 cents a quart, and the experience of getting milk was completely different from anything you know today. The milkman still existed in most American towns in 1954. He left heavy glass bottles on your porch before sunrise. You left the empties out the night before, and by morning they were replaced with full ones. The cream still sitting thick at the top because it had not been homogenized away. Whole milk, real milk, and that tasted like it came from an animal and not a processing facility. The bottles were cold and wet from the early morning air. You brought them in and set them on the kitchen counter, and that was breakfast already half assembled. Today, a quart of milk costs around $1.50 if you can even find it sold by the quart anymore. That is a 400% increase. The milk today is ultra-pasteurized to sit on shelves for weeks without spoiling. It barely resembles the thing it is named after. But here is the sharper calculation behind the price. In 1954, a worker earning the minimum wage of 75 cents an hour had to work just over 22 minutes to afford that quart of milk. Today, at the federal minimum wage, that same worker has to work about 12 minutes, so the raw math looks slightly better. But try telling that to someone paying $20.25 rent, utilities, car insurance, student loan debt, and healthcare costs on a wage philosophy that has not meaningfully moved since the mid-20th century. A dozen large eggs in 1954 cost about 60 cents. Your dollar bought you a full dozen, and you still had 40 cents left in your pocket for something else. A carton of eggs was a workhorse product. Eggs were not a weekend luxury or something you rationed. Bacon and eggs was the standard weekday breakfast of the American working class, the fuel that got men to the factory floor and kids to school. You bought them at the grocery store in a flimsy cardboard carton, sometimes with bits of straw or feathers still stuck to the shells, because they had come from somewhere real not long ago. They tasted like eggs, rich, orange-yolked real. Today, a standard carton of factory eggs runs around $4, and if you want anything remotely close to what people ate in 1954, free-range or pasture-raised, you are looking at $6 or $7 minimum. That is a 500 to 600% increase. Walk into any grocery store in America today with a single dollar bill, and you cannot buy 2 eggs. The egg, once the universal symbol of cheap and reliable protein for the working man, has quietly become a luxury item. And you know what? Drop a comment below right now and tell me, when did you first notice the price of eggs genuinely shock you at the checkout? I want to know exactly when that moment hit people, because it hits differently for everyone. A full 1-pound tin of coffee, Maxwell House or Folgers, cost about 91 cents in 1954. Your dollar bought you the whole pound with a few cents to spare. Now we need to talk about what that pound of coffee actually was, because this is where the story gets particularly infuriating. The can was metal, sealed airtight, and you opened it with a key that peeled a metal strip around the rim. When that lid came off, the smell hit you like a physical force. Rich, dark, deeply roasted. A full pound, 16 ounces. Today, go look at the shelves in any grocery store. The plastic tubs and vacuum-sealed bags you see everywhere are 12 ounces, sometimes 11, sometimes 10.5. They have quietly shrunk the package by 25 to 35%, while simultaneously raising the price on what remains. A 12-ounce bag of decent coffee today cost $8 or $9. If you adjust for weight to compare it to the 1954 full pound, you are paying close to $12 for the equivalent. That is a price increase of over 1,200%. They took the metal tin, the ritual of opening it, the full aroma, the honest full pound, and replaced it with a plastic tub, a smaller quantity, and a price that would have seemed like a printing error in 1954. And if you are enjoying this breakdown of American history told with real numbers, do me a favor and hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love this kind of content. Now, back to 1954, ground beef. At the butcher counter in 1954, a pound of ground beef cost about 29 cents. Your dollar bought you 3 full pounds. 3 pounds of ground beef in 1954 was a week of dinners for a working family. Meatloaf on Monday, spaghetti on Wednesday, hamburgers on Friday, and the experience of buying it was nothing like what you encounter today. There was no styrofoam tray wrapped in plastic film sitting under a fluorescent light. There was a man behind a wooden counter in a white apron and a paper hat. He asked what you wanted. He ground it fresh right in front of you, weighed it on a balanced scale with a practiced eye, wrapped it in white butcher paper, and tied it with string. You knew exactly what animal it came from because you were standing 3 feet from where it was prepared. Today, ground beef in most grocery stores costs $5 to $6 a pound, sometimes more. It is machine processed from dozens of different animals simultaneously, pressed into uniform trays, wrapped in plastic that is designed to make it look fresher than it is. Your dollar in 1954 bought Sunday dinner for the whole family. Today it buys you roughly 3 ounces. Not enough meat for a single decent burger patty. Now let us talk about gas, because this one hits differently when you hold the recession in mind. In 1954, the national average for a gallon of regular gasoline was about 22 cents. Your dollar bought you more than 4 gallons. 4 gallons of gasoline, and when you pulled into a service station in 1954, you did not get out of the car. A teenager in a clean uniform came out to meet you. He pumped the gas. He checked your oil without being asked. He wiped your windshield clean with a rag. He checked your tire pressure on all 4 tires and told you if one was low. He did all of that for 22 cents a gallon. The pumps were tall and rounded with glass globes on top. You could see the gasoline swirling inside the globe before it flowed down into your tank. The whole transaction felt like service. Genuine service. Like the attendant was personally invested in your vehicle, leaving in better shape than it arrived. Today, the national average for a gallon of gas hovers around $3.50. You pump it yourself regardless of weather. You watch a little advertising screen play commercials at you while you stand in the rain. You pay 15 times the 1954 price, and you do every single part of it alone. Your dollar in 1954 got you across town and back multiple times for a week. Today it gets you slightly under a third of a gallon. Let us talk about something smaller. A Hershey bar in 1954 cost a nickel, 5 cents. Your dollar bought you 20 of them, 20 chocolate bars. A nickel was a meaningful and spendable coin in the pocket of a child in 1954. You could find one on the sidewalk and genuinely have a great afternoon with it. A Hershey bar, a Coke, and you still had change left. The bar itself was thicker and denser than what exists today, made with a higher cocoa ratio and sweetened with real cane sugar, not the high fructose corn syrup that replaced it in the 1980s. Today, a standard Hershey bar at any checkout counter costs $1.79. That is a 3,480% increase, and the bar has physically shrunk. It is lighter, thinner, and contains more sugar relative to cocoa than the original. What you are paying dramatically more for is demonstrably less of a product in every measurable way. Your dollar in 1954 bought 20 chocolate bars. Today, it covers the sales tax on one. Speaking of 5-cent America, you could buy 20 bottles of Coca-Cola for $1 in 1954. The iconic 6.5-ounce glass bottles. Green glass, contoured, pulled ice cold from the red Coca-Cola chest, cooler at the drugstore or the filling station. You dropped your nickel in the slot. You slid the bottle along the metal track inside the cooler until it cleared the release mechanism. You pulled it out, still dripping with ice water and condensation. You popped the cap on the opener bolted to the side of the machine. The cap fell into the metal catch bin below with a clean, satisfying clink. You stood right there and drank it. The carbonation was sharp and immediate. The sweetness was real cane sugar. It tasted exactly like things it was supposed to be because it was. Today, a single bottle of Coke at a convenience store is $2 to $3. The formula uses high fructose corn syrup. The container is plastic. The experience has been reduced to a transaction. Your dollar in 1954 bought you 20 ice-cold Cokes in glass bottles. Today it barely covers a third of one plastic bottle. That is not simply inflation. That is a fundamental restructuring of what a dollar means to the person holding it. A movie ticket in 1954 cost 50 cents for children and about 90 cents to $1 for adults, depending on the theater and the city. Your dollar got you through the door for the matinee. And the experience of going to the movies in 1954 was completely removed from anything you would recognize today. One screen, one movie. No 20-minute previews. A newsreel played first, then a cartoon short, then the feature. The seats were upholstered, and the theater smelled like popcorn and carpet, and something warm and indescribable that every single movie house smelled like in that era. Nobody talked during the film. Nobody had a glowing rectangle in their hand pulling their attention sideways. You sat in the dark with 100 other people and you watched the movie. That was the entire activity. Today, a standard movie ticket in a mid-sized American city runs $15 to $18. Smacks is $25 or more. A teenager in 1954 working minimum wage could earn enough in a single to see a film, buy a Coke, and walk out with change. A teenager working federal minimum wage today has to clock more than 2 hours just to buy the ticket alone. Everything else comes out of whatever is left over. Here is one that genuinely surprises people when they see the numbers. A first-class postage stamp in 1954 cost 3 cents. Your dollar bought you 33 stamps and you had a penny left over. Think about what 33 stamps meant in an era before email, before text messages, before any form of digital communication. You could pay every bill you owed by mail for $1 and still have stamps remaining. You could write to relatives across the country, send birthday cards to every member of your extended family, correspond with an old friend you had not seen since the war. The stamps had presidents on them. You licked the back, which tasted terrible, and it worked. You dropped the envelope in the blue mailbox on the corner, and it arrived anywhere in America within 3 days. 3 cents, anywhere in the country, 3 days. Today, a first-class stamp costs 68 cents. That is a 167% increase. The physical cost of moving a single letter across the country has absolutely skyrocketed even as we simultaneously built an entire digital infrastructure where moving information costs essentially nothing. The irony of that is not subtle. A pound of bacon in 1954 cost around 65 cents at the butcher or grocery counter. Your dollar bought you a full pound and left 35 cents in change. The bacon came wrapped in butcher paper, sometimes sliced fresh right there at the counter while you waited. You took it home and fried it in a cast-iron skillet on a gas burner, and the smell of it filled every room in the house. Thick-cut strips that held their shape and rendered down into something that tasted like an actual food and not a sodium delivery system. It was on the table every weekend morning without question. Today, a pound of bacon runs $7 to $8 at a standard grocery store, and more for anything marketed as premium or thick cut. That is over a 1,000% increase. And here is the shrinkflation detail that makes it worse. The strips are thinner than they used to be. They shrink dramatically when cooked because the packages contain significantly more water and injected fat than they once did. Half of what you pay for evaporates in the pan. In 1954, bacon was meat. Today it is flavored and processed salt that happens to smell like what bacon used to be. A man's haircut in 1954 cost about 75 cents. Your dollar paid for the cut and left a quarter on the counter as a tip. And the barber shop of 1954 was not a transaction, it was an institution. You walked in off the street and took one of the chairs along the wall. You read the newspaper or a sports magazine and waited your turn. When the barber called you up, you settled into the big leather and chrome chair. He draped the cape around your neck and fastened it. He cut your hair with scissors and a comb. He ran the clippers up the back and sides. He trimmed your sideburns with a level of precision that came from 10,000 repetitions. He shaved the back of your neck with a straight razor hot lather applied first. With a brush, the blade drawn clean. He showed you the back in the hand mirror. You nodded. You got up, left the quarter on the counter, said thank you, and walked out looking exactly right. The whole thing took 20 minutes. Today, a basic haircut at a standard barbershop runs $25 to $35. That is a 3,000 to 4,000% increase. The straight razor is mostly gone. The ritual is mostly gone. The leather chairs in many places are gone. What remains is a haircut that costs more than a 1954 family spent on groceries for several days. A quart of quality motor oil in 1954 cost about 40 cents. Your dollar bought you 2 quarts and left you 20 cents for something else. The cans were metal, cone-shaped, and you needed a church key opener to punch 2 holes in the top, one for the oil to pour through and one for air so it flowed cleanly. It was messy. Oil dripped on the driveway. You wiped your hands on a rag that had once been a shirt. But men changed their own oil in 1954. They checked their own fluids, adjusted their own timing, replaced their own belts. It was simply part of owning a vehicle and knowing how it worked. Today, a quart of synthetic motor oil runs $9 to $10. Even the cheap conventional oil is $6. That is a 2,000% increase. The cans are plastic. The oil is chemically engineered. And most people pay a quick lube shop $30 to perform the 15-minute task their grandfather did himself in the driveway on a Saturday morning. And now we get to the heart of everything. Because every price we have looked at only carries its full weight when you hold it against what people were actually earning in 1954. And this is where the story of the recession stops being economics and becomes something personal. The federal minimum wage in 1954 was 75 cents an hour. A worker at that minimum had to work 80 minutes to earn a single dollar. The average wage for a working man in 1954 was closer to $1.80 an hour. So he reached that dollar in roughly 33 minutes. But a woman performing equivalent work earned significantly less, often around $1.10 an hour for office or clerical positions. She worked nearly an hour for that same dollar. The disparity was written into the system and accepted without serious challenge. And then there is the recession layer that makes all of this heavier. By mid-1954, nearly 6% of the American workforce was unemployed. That means millions of men and women were earning zero. For those households, a dollar was not a historical curiosity. It was not a thought experiment. It was the difference between the children eating dinner that evening or not. That is the thing that tends to get lost when we talk about historical prices in the abstract. We look at 18-cent bread and 22-cent gas and 20 bottles of Coke for $1, and it all seems quaint and charming like a museum exhibit. But behind every one of those prices was a real family in a real recession year, stretching every dollar as far as human ingenuity could make it go. And that dollar, even in 1954 at its most stressed and pressured, could still do something. It could still feed people. It could still get a man to work and back. It could still represent a meaningful unit of genuine value. Today, that same dollar bill will not buy you a single item from the list we just went through. It will not cover the sales tax on a dozen eggs in most states. It will not purchase a third of a gallon of gas. It is not enough to complete a single meaningful economic transaction in the modern American market. We have done something genuinely remarkable as a nation. We have taken the world's reserve currency, one of the most powerful financial instruments in human history, and through 70 years of inflation, deficit spending, monetary expansion, corporate shrinkflation, and every other mechanism at our disposal, we have quietly and steadily eroded it down to near meaninglessness for the average person standing at a grocery store checkout. That is not a political opinion. It is arithmetic. The numbers do not care what party you belong to. If this kind of honest, unfiltered look at American economic history is what you are here for, then subscribe to this channel right now and hit the notification bell so you catch every upload. This is exactly the kind of content we do here. No textbook framing, no sanitized narrative. Just the real numbers laid out against each other so you can see what actually happened to the purchasing power of ordinary Americans over time. And before you go, I want to leave you with one question, and I genuinely want you to answer it in the comments section below. If you could go back to 1954 with $100 in your pocket, what is the first thing you would buy and why? Drop it below. I read every single comment, and that question always generates the most interesting answers. Anyway, I will leave it there. It really does make you think about what we have quietly allowed to happen to the value of a dollar, and whether anyone in a position of power is going to do anything serious about it. I have got plenty more of these deep historical comparisons coming up very soon. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.